Hello and welcome to this month's ID update. Thank you for joining us. If you're in the UK, I hope you're doing well in the heat. I'm not. Heidi, how are things with you?
It's much more pleasant here in the States, well, at least in the Great Lakes region where I'm at in Cleveland. It is like beautiful, like cool in the evenings, warm in the daytime, like afternoon rain shower. Like it's just been gorgeous. Last summer was terrible, so I have really been enjoying it this year.
Excellent, glad to hear it. If you are joining us, please do jump into the chat on your platform of choice. We'd love to hear your thoughts as we go through today's discussion topics. We will be jumping into what we took away from being judges on the recent iSpring course creation competition. We've done this a couple of times now, I think, between us, and it's been interesting to see things change and maybe what people are getting right and where there's some development needed. I don't think it's fair to say there's people are getting a lot of stuff right. But also, as always, places we can improve. So we want to share some of our thoughts with you all today. And then if there's anything else you want to discuss, do let us know in the chat and we'll happily include it in the conversation. So first things first, Heidi, what were your kind of, I don't know, top level thoughts when you were reviewing your entries for the competition?
Yeah, so I always give the disclaimer that I am a very tough grader. That's not always true in the course contest. I think it varies greatly from judge to judge because I've spoken to a handful of different judges and heard like very different like scores given among them. Now, granted, we don't judge all the entries, right? We each get a portion and there's like some overlap. So people get more than one round of feedback for their entry. Um, but I think um, overall, I think compared to years past, I saw an increase in kind of creativity, in
Mm.
kind of like the diversity of topics, in the creativity in terms of the visual design, in terms of the choices, where I saw an overall need for some improvement. Is around honestly the fundamental basic skills of instructional design, and kind of those foundational problem solving skills, those foundational, like, is this the right medium for this topic, right? Is a course or a lesson the right delivery method, right? And some of those just very fundamental choices that we can get into and kind of nitpicky, but that's basically the big picture trends. I would say overall strengths, diversity, creativity, like, just diversity of thought, diversity of entries, and then overall need for improvement, foundational instructional design basics.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought the creativity point's interesting because I thought there was definitely, I don't know, I felt there was more ambition in some of the ideas.
Sure.
Um, but I think the thing that struck me was where a few years ago there were the very creative ones that were very well put together, very well executed, as well as having a creative idea, and there were those who didn't. This year I saw far more who had clearly had a creative idea, but had struggled to maybe execute on it. Um,
I would agree. Yeah.
and it really got me thinking about like why would that sort of what's been the driver of that. And I was looking back through and I realised what there was also an uptick in, and I don't know if these two are related, but there was a big uptick in the use of AI imagery. Like very
Sure.
noticeably.
Sure.
Even the kind
That
of
makes
less
sense.
creative courses had a lot of AI generated imagery.
Sure.
Um, and I mean, certainly for me, I wasn't particularly interested from the competition's perspective sense in the should we use AI imagery at all conversation. Like it's not helpful to the competition. But what
Sure.
did strike me, I'm not again, I don't think we viewed many of the same entries. I think we largely viewed different ones, didn't we, between the two of
Yeah.
us? A lot of mine, brilliant idea, but every image felt like it belonged in an entirely different course. There was no stylistic consistency in terms of color, style, size, anything at all, really. And
Yeah.
it really, it really hurt. Clearly, what was a brilliant creative idea in the execution phase, because there was this constant, sorry, it's changed again. Oh, and it's changed again. This feels odd. It feels almost weirdly like going back in time rather than forwards, back to the world of, well, I loaded the clip art panel and there were only 3 images for whatever, so I used all 3 even though they're totally different to each other.
Sure.
It kind of felt like going back to that. So, but otherwise, I think, yeah, there was lots and lots of other good stuff, but just the creativity point really made me think about that, because that's what, I don't say it surprised me, but it kind of reopens that ongoing conversation of, are we a creative industry?
Mm.
Are we creatives by trade? I've always been very uncomfortable with that concept, I've got to be honest. Um, because to my mind, what we do isn't massive. Like, everyone is creative in what they do individually. An accountant is creative in their own very accountanty way. How
Sure.
creative they are depends on how long you go to prison for. It's or not. But I would argue like creativity is not for me at the core of what I do in as an L&D professional. But it opened that question to me of like, for other people, do they define it as a creative pursuit? And I don't know the answer to that.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've got
I
a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've talked about this a little bit before,
Mm.
like on LinkedIn and stuff, because I've challenged people to not be selfish instructional designers, right?
Mm.
Because I think that instructional design falls somewhere between, like, I know what I think it's not, right? I know I don't think that it's a trade. I remember when there was a particular academy that will go unnamed today because it's not really relevant to anyone anymore, that was trying to sell instructional design as a trade. And the kick my boyfriend got out of that, because he works in the trades, and
Like
how
the
funny
real
he thought
trades where
that
you make
was.
actual
Yes.
things, right? Where you're genuinely useful to society in the event of that's
Exactly.
yeah.
And you can pick up a wrench and fix something in under 15 minutes, yeah. So I don't think it, like, we're not on that side of the spectrum. And then I don't think it's also fully creative, right? I don't think that it's an art, right? I think there is an art to what people do, in the same way that you're saying there's an art to accounting, there's an art to, yeah. But it's not an art, right? So I don't think it's a trade. I don't think it's an art. I think it falls somewhere in the middle, and I would call it a craft,
Like that.
because that's where those two kind of meet in the middle for me personally,
Mm.
in my own like mental model of it. So I see it more of a craft, right? So you have to combine creative solutions with like this procedural kind of process driven structure underneath, right? If it's a model that you're following, if it's a framework that you're following, whatever your process looks like. And kind of there is some creativity, because, okay, do we need a course? Do we need a video? Do we, like, there's some creativity there where we have to make certain choices. But then there are other elements of it that it should be, not always are, but very like regimented and process driven, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's made me think. There, I was chatting to Andy Lancaster for Learning Now TV, and they're doing
Okay,
these
yeah.
fantastic like 6 minute segments on like one little bit of learning theory in 6 minutes. And we were talking about the importance or lack thereof of the specific modality trainings delivered in. And I was delivering the usual kind of, here's the research that says it doesn't fricking matter. Good training's good training. If it's effective, and it's not an effect. It's not being effective because it's a video or an e-learning. It's the instruction that was effective.
Sure.
Relatively simple stuff, but I think we still get hung up on it a lot because we still get it quite wrong most of the time. And what you were saying there just made me think of it, creativity in choosing how you deliver it. And I think this is where I maybe view it differently, in the fact of, I talk about in that interview that I design by exclusion. So rather than thinking, what could I do, which I would see as like a creative approach, I
Oh,
basically
sure.
cross everything off the list that is not appropriate or possible. And whatever I'm left with is how we deliver the training. And if there's more than one thing left, it's which one is the most efficient. And that one goes in. So I suspect which way you approach that question is kind of indicative to whether you consider yourself to be relatively creative, or I, for instance, view us much closer to being like an engineering world approach to work, where
Sure.
I'm very focused on the where is the data leading us, and what have we tested, and what proof do we have to justify this decision, as opposed to the what could we do conversation. Um,
Do you
yeah,
think you could run a team in like sprints, like
that
2 week sprints? Do you think you could run a scrum team in
uh,
L&D?
yeah,
Ah,
100%.
I fought that so hard. I was like, no, that does not fit how we work. Like
Interesting.
that does not fit how our team. That's why I asked, because I was like, I bet you would say yes
Mm,
to this. Where I
yeah,
was like, absolutely not. Like we are too fluid. Like we don't like if we're done. Like I would rather be done before 2 weeks if that's the case. I would like so. I think what we're describing is the same thing, right? Like we have this repertoire of solutions in our head, and you think of all of them with the ones that don't apply eliminated, whereas I think of them one by one as they come up into my brain. So like it's but we're doing the same thing,
yes,
right? Like
yeah,
and
yeah,
we might even be drawing from the same list, of a similar
probably.
list probably, right? But I'm thinking of them one at a time as the person's talking to me, or as I'm talking to the stakeholder and finding out more about the project, and then going yes or no, and then putting them in those buckets accordingly. So yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the different thought processes that go into it, and how the approach and how it's different. Yeah.
Yeah, do you know, I think that may have to be a future episode of this show, because I think
I
that's
know.
genuinely quite interesting.
So interesting.
Because yeah, that I wonder if that is often the crux of this creativity versus something.
Yeah.
I'm never quite sure what the opposite is, because it's not creative, but it's I think it's more
Right. Like what do
discomfort with what that
you
language often means, right? It's
Right. I feel
yeah,
like it's more of like a ambiguous versus structured, rather than like creative versus
yeah,
engineering, right? And
yeah. I think
I
that's
think
probably
there's
it.
some research for us to put on our back burners somewhere there.
There we go. Well, keep an eye out for that conversation coming up in future episodes, everyone. Um, um,
That's great.
thank you for dropping comments in. My opinion, everybody talks about using AI, especially for images, but few talk about the skill and craft in using it in a way that doesn't feel like clip art. Oh, absolutely. It's interesting actually. There was a really fantastic thread in the Learning Network community a couple of weeks ago. I think Andrew Jacobs was involved in it, and then he posted it to LinkedIn as well, so it's probably out there somewhere still, where someone was talking about using AI to write quiz questions. And setting aside whether or not that's a use case any of us would want to do, they would be saying, "Hey, I gave it the whole storyboard, but I found that what it was giving me wasn't very good." And I think there is sometimes this expectation that every AI model is going to be reasonably good at anything if you just give it the source material and say, do the thing. Whereas certainly I've found to get anything even approaching usable. And this is, I thought I should do some testing really and maybe write about it a little bit. Like for question writing, you have to do a lot of work. Like you almost need to set up like a in Claude they're called skills. I think in
Yeah.
ChatGPT they're called like is custom GPT still where they're at? I
Yeah.
don't use OpenAI
I
stuff
think
anymore,
so.
but
I haven't used it in a while.
yeah, this is so you have to do quite a lot of work to actually get it to do one thing well. They are general output engines otherwise, right? I think it's the
Yeah.
same with these images. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot. I always hesitate to be like, oh, there's skill in using a chatbot, but there is. I think to get usable outputs in your own work, I think there is a certain
There
amount of skill
is.
required.
Yeah, and Christy Tucker is somebody fantastic to
Mm,
follow in terms of consistent AI output. She does a lot of work around like characters, images, and making sure that like it's visually consistent for whatever project you're working on. So I recommend following her on LinkedIn for sure. She's a great person for that.
no, absolutely. But yeah, that was my first observation. I know there's one thing though that I think we both wanted to talk about after our judging experience. I think there's probably a few things we overlap on. Um, but this was the one that I think it stood out the biggest because it was the one I wasn't, if I'm honest, expecting. Let's talk learning objectives.
Should we talked about this last year.
Yeah.
I did a whole post last year on this that was very popular too, as about how, like, it's first impressions, right? For me, learning objectives is first impressions. It's like your first introduction to what you're interacting with. And like, we still have just got like the understand, blah, 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 or a list of topics, or like, and the learning objectives are like terrible. And I know that it's like part of the contest rules to have them, right? So we don't have to debate about whether or not we should include them for the learner today, because it's part of the contest rules to have them there, right? So if you're going to have them there, gosh, they better be decent. And there was a very big discrepancy. And I would say that probably 80% of the entries that I saw were not up to par in terms of the learning objectives. And they were kind of all over the place. Is that what you experienced as well?
Yeah, for me, it was 100%. I pretty much copied and pasted my comments on learning objectives because, and like, part of me felt bad because I am one of those people that I would not put them at the start of the course. I think it's wasted time in that initial really important attention motivating grabbing piece. But as you say, it's part of the rules. But that doesn't mean you have to just copy and paste a bullet pointed list of you will be able understand, do, whatever. You can tell it's been a while since I've written any because I don't use them. Can't even remember. I'm sure if I tried, I'm sure I could remember the little list of verbs. But if you've got to put them in, and some stakeholders, in fairness, still insist on this as well. So I've got clients that still insist on having the "what will you learn" in right at the start. But that you could just talk to them like a human being. Rather than a bullet point list of set verbs, why not say, hey, this course is about keeping you safe at work. To keep you safe, we're going to take a look at how to use fire extinguishers. We're going to talk about getting out of the building as quickly as possible and how you can always make sure that at the end of the day, you go home to your family. That, to me, is a perfectly acceptable learning objective screen. No bullet points, no specially selected verbs, or if you are going to go down the route of giving the literal, technically accurate learning objectives in there, do complete them. So I want to see success criteria. I want to see industry relevance. You've got to go one way or the other. Putting half a boring learning objective on a screen is not gonna cut the mustard, as it were. Because quite often I would get you will understand the snowplow model. It's like,
Yeah.
where's the second half of that objective? What is the success criteria? So that I can do what? Without the success criteria, it's just a wild, you'll do this. We don't know how we're going to measure it, but, well, hey, it's going to be fine. It's kind of like a lot of L&D work in a nutshell there, right? Don't worry, we've done stuff. Activity has happened. We'll just trust that it has impact. And I do still think a lot of that's tied to learning objectives. But yeah, I think this was an area where a lot of people lost a lot of points that they could have got. They could have maxed out those points so easily. I think from a competition perspective, like if you're thinking of entering next year, if you get your learning objectives right, you're going to have a real good time.
A leg up for sure. Yeah. And to your point, and I've done a lot of work on, I have stuff out there. Go to my LinkedIn, go to my website, I've done sessions on how to write learning objectives, combining Bloom's with Mager to make them relevant, to make them, cover the what's in it for me, to make them, something that can actually be measured. Right. But I would say that the other big thing, can I bring up the other big thing? The other major point?
Dive in.
The other major easy points loss for me as a judge that I gave some people zeros in some areas was locking down that navigation. So let's talk about this. All right. Again, within the parameters of this contest, right? you've got like 10 or 12 industry judges, something. There's a lot of judges because there's a lot of entries now, right? And we get a list of about, I think it was like 8 to 10ish, right, of different entries to go through. So I do it like I do when I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking at a portfolio, right? I don't know if everybody does it that same kind of way, but that's kind of like the way that I approach it, is that same kind of, the things I'm looking for is very similar. And when I'm a hiring manager and I look at a portfolio and it has courses that are locked down navigation wise, I immediately, that's a red flag for me, because that's your portfolio. This is a contest that you've entered. Why do you need to lock that down? Because I have a very big opinion that there are only 3 good reasons, 3 to lock down a course, and I will give you them. The first one is if you are required by the government, not your leadership of not the CEO, not the VP, but if you are required by the government, like you are in California, and I forget the other states, it's been a long time, to have a certain amount of contact hours for training. They do this with like sexual harassment training in California, where you have to have you have to have a certain number of contact hours of verified training. Okay, fine. That's one reason where I will let you lock navigation. Okay. The second one is if you have scenarios or branching scenario or scenes where unlocking that portion of the course will cause chaos for your learner, because you can't have them navigate a branching scenario, go all over the place. But in that case, you only lock down that portion of the course. And my third reason, I don't have a third reason, but I'm leaving it open for somebody to give me one because they have yet to do so. And I've heard a lot of excuses, a lot of reasons, but we are adults. We are adult learners. And especially when you are entering a contest or doing your portfolio, the hiring manager wants to jump around. We have to get a sampling. We don't have a lot of time. We cannot go through your whole 90-minute course when we're hiring, or even for the contest, right? Like there were some of them that were so locked down that I was like sitting there for forever. And I was just like, this is, jeopardizing my time. And it wasn't even that good.
And I think
so,
go on.
I really, really feel very, very strongly about locking down navigation for no reason. That is my number one pet peeve, is when people do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where I do get that in a lot of businesses still now. Like senior leaders will go, oh, I want them to do it in this order, blah 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 blah. But we've got to be able to have a conversation there about sort of, well, one, from a learning perspective, you're wrong. 2, like, why is it you distrust your people so intensely?
Yeah.
What is it about your entire workforce that you are deeming them to be so wildly untrustworthy and incompetent that you have to lay this out for them? Do you do this for their job? If so, that's why performance is low and training ain't going to fix it. You're the problem. We've got to be able to have really, really, maybe not that exact wording, unless you really want to go for it and it's your last day. But, that you've got to be able to have that conversation around, what adds value and what doesn't. We often talk about, how can we find areas of the business to add value? We aren't doing that if we're churning out things. What you just described, that sense of frustration and the perceived lack of value, it's exactly the same thing that people in businesses feel when you give them that same piece of lockdown training.
Yeah.
And they're sat there going, I know the first 6 pages of this, only page 7 is new. Could you please just give me the stuff that's relevant? Right. No, you've got to do it all because then everyone feels better. Oh, well, Everyone feels better. Marvelous. It's
right.
It's kind of like once you do it once, though, it becomes self-perpetuating because you set that expectation, you set that standard. So it's really important, I think, from day one to be like, no, we don't do that. I think in one of our earliest shows together, we spoke about having like an internal, as a team, you should have like a manifesto of this is how we do learning in the company. This is our approach to design. This is our approach to delivery. This is our approach to measurement. And you publish it to everyone in the organization, because then everyone knows where you stand and where they stand and what you are just going to say no to and how you're going to approach working with them. And I think if you do that, it gives you a foundation to fight these things from, or to push back
Right.
on things from, rather than sitting down for the fresh with your whatever the senior stakeholder is. Let's be honest, it's not normally someone at C-suite in most organizations. It's a head of this or a lead that or whatever. If you've not got that foundation, you have to have that conversation fresh with every person you work with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's important. Yeah. I think it's really important. I also think that it becomes harder to do what you need to do when you're constantly trying to justify locking things down, or we have to get these completions, or that level of structure to me shows those lack of fundamentals that I was talking about, right? Because it shows like specifically that like lock navigation, poor learning objectives is, there's an emphasis on the tool and creating the output rather than focusing on what are we trying to do here? What are we trying, like, what's the goal that we're trying to accomplish and how are we going to get there? Right. Because I think that's when, one of the biggest arguments people have is, well, lockdown navigation, because otherwise, how will we make sure that they learned anything? Well, honey, you can't make sure they learned anything even if you lock down the navigation, because I can tell you right now about the stories that I have where I have gone through forced training. I once downloaded a 16 times or a Google Chrome extension that allowed me to watch videos at 16 times the normal speed to get through a mandatory training. So they locked it down and I still didn't watch it, right? If your audience does not want to watch your thing, or they do not find it relevant, or they do not want to be there, it doesn't matter how many locks you put in place, they will not do it. You cannot put toothpicks in their eyelids and force them open and make them watch things, right? And I don't think you should, right? Because not everything needs to be for everyone, and that entire course can serve different people differently, right? And it should. And that's why I talk about too, I kind of shifted the way that I talk about instructional design is like creating moments, a series of moments for people to engage with. And you don't get to choose whether they do or not. It's like a sampling, right? That's why I talk about like the portfolio and course contest so interchangeably, is because I see them very similarly, right? Like it's a sampling of your work, right? You don't give somebody the whole damn pizza if you're doing a sampling, right? You give them a tiny little piece so that they want more. So stop giving people like the whole pizza. Stop trying to give them all this stuff. Stop locking it down and making us go through, like, make these series of moments that invite people to interact with the content, that invite people to memorize it, that invite people to, apply it. And whether they do or not is not up to you. And I think that's a really hard control thing for people to let go of.
Oh, it's like we really all we could this, and I think this is why there was an interesting conversation recently about like the use of the word learning again. It's one. It always comes up. Do we design learning? Are we learning designers? I do still like the word training. I think training is what we create. I know some people dislike the word training because it has like, you train dogs. Like, what's wrong with dogs?
I know.
In the average day of the week, I sort of look at, you know what, I could go for that life some weeks. Just sit around, chew stuff, eat things, go to sleep. Looks amazing. I have no problem being a dog. However, I understand some people don't like it, but when we do it, whether we're creating training or experiences or whatever, it's all opportunities to learn. It's not learning. As you say, you cannot force someone to learn something. You just can't. It doesn't work that way. But what we should be doing, and I think what we often overlook and don't put enough value on, is the importance of persuading people to engage in that sort of cognitive effort of learning. justifying not to senior leaders and stakeholders with data, but to the person we're actually trying to help, that we're trying to help them, trying to get them on board,
Right.
trying to get them to expend their energy. Let's be honest, expend their limited energy in the day learning something, which they probably don't care about on a personal level in the workplace. Let's be honest. It's very rare we get the benefit of delivering training that the audience is like, oh, I'm so glad you've given me training on this subject. It
Right.
happens basically when you hire them, they're really happy. And if it's training on something like how to cash in your company shares, everyone does that course. But no one chooses to do the fourth GDPR refresher because there's been a breach in the legal department somewhere or whatever
Right.
else, or the update to this year's card processing legislation. No one gets excited about that. And yet they're really important. Our job is not just to deliver it, it's to bring people on board, right? It's to motivate them to see the value and want to spend the effort. I think Matt Richter does a great job of explaining this through like self-determination theory, and how motivation isn't learning as such, but it's really important to get them in the room, keep them in the room, and to get them to do the work once they've left the room. I think
Yeah.
often by not motivating them, we can make them do the training, because we can go, it's mandatory and HR will chase you to the end of the earth until you've completed it. But there is zero. In fact, I would argue you've probably damaged the chance of any learning happening, as you say, when you attach all that stuff. I don't have evidence for
Yeah.
that, but that would be, and I don't know how we could ever really measure it. It'd take a long time.
Um, I mean, I think you can make the argument for cognitive load, that contributes to cognitive load, and then you could from there
Yeah,
show that
you think,
that
yeah. Yeah,
inhibits the experience.
you could extrapolate an argument from it, but I always think the more extrapolation there is in your argument, the less loudly you should make it, right? That's but
Of course.
but I would
Yeah.
strongly suspect that if we had a decent amount of longitudinal data, we would likely see that heavily mandated training is just less effective. I would be shocked
Sure.
otherwise. Um,
Yeah. Well, because I think there's a lot of things like, you get the lawyers who no, you have to use the SOP word for word in the training because, you get those stakeholders, right, where you like have to do these things.
yeah,
And we try to find like ways around it. But I think you bring up a good point too about like engagement and motivation, and something that I see and continue to see and saw in this contest, but continue to see outside of it, is that the engagement motivation being equated to how many times am I clicking,
yeah,
right? And more clicks equals more engagement, when, truly the opposite is usually true, right? The more efficiently you can get into something, the more the faster you can get to application, the better, right? And I find that a lot of people add a lot of, and granted, yes, again, course contest, you want to show off the features. I get it, but make sure that it is relevant and that it fits. Like doing, select, which thing this goes into, but like they're not two separate things. It's confusing, right? Having flip cards because you haven't had something in a minute and the text is going off the flip card and it's not well contained within that visual feature. Like these are things that are just, their information design, their visual design. I'm not a good graphic designer, but I'm decent at information design, decent enough that I'm not going to have a bunch of text that you can't see on a flip card just because I want a flip card, just because I go, oh, well, if I
yeah.
have a flip card, that's engaging. There's nothing engaging about a flip card. There's nothing engaging about a drag and drop. There's nothing engaging about tick, 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 tick. I'm doing that already. I'm already doing that to click next. Like, that's not where the engagement happens. The engagement happens because of what is in those things, right?
Absolutely. This is, you know, this kind of goes to the heart of whenever anyone complains about insert authoring tool here. whether it's Storyline, whether it's Evolve, whether it's iSpring, whatever, every authoring tool, someone will eventually say, "Oh, it's no good for engagement." You're like, it's kind of like the telltale sign of not understanding what you're doing. There is no link between which authoring tool you are using and whether or not you are designing an engaging experience. None.
Yes.
That sits with
Yes.
you. It is technology agnostic. So, like, when we look at that in terms of this competition, it's like iSpring does X many things in terms of functionality. Not a single one of them is labeled engagement, because you can't click engagement and drag it onto your screen. That comes from the narrative that you spin around whatever interactions you're going to have. It, as you say, it comes from the relevance of content. It comes from the applicability of content. It comes from challenging people. I think that's one of those things that got lost in it was probably just pre-COVID. Do you remember where everything was how easy training can be? Our training is designed to be as easy as possible for your people. So you made ineffective training. Well done. That sounds fantastic. Why would I pay? It's like the biggest weakness of your content made a marketing bullet point. Bizarre. But I wonder if we're still seeing some of that, like you say, an over reliance on clicking a button to add rather than thinking
Oh,
really
yeah.
carefully. Because I would say,
Yeah.
I read a lot of books in our space, and I find them to be tremendously engaging. They are not in any way interactive. They are the least interactive experience you could hope to find, but they are, for me, the
Yes.
most engaging. All I add to them is my notes, where I scribble down the margins and highlight stuff. That is the level of interactivity I require to get
Yeah.
value, and it's relevant, it's applicable, it's challenging, it's engaging. Look at that. Everything in one. All someone had to do was send me a book. No flip cards, no multiple choice questions. There's not even a bit at the end giving me a score and a badge. It's very upsetting. But,
Yes, I mean, I read scholarly journal articles that are engaging to me often, right? Like, I read research that is engaging to me, Substack articles, and those are not interactive, like you said. Especially the scholarly journal articles. My goodness, I can't think of anything more dry, quote unquote. But to me, if I'm looking up relevant research, if I'm looking up research that I'm either writing about or studying or trying to incorporate in a project or something like that, I'm invested,
Mm.
right? And I think people assume that the investment is already there somehow, or already there's almost like this expectation of like, if we build it, they will come. I know Ashley Hinchcliffe and I always use this one from Field of Dreams, and we say, if you build it, they will not come, right? Like, just because you have the thing doesn't mean that people are going to pay attention. It doesn't mean that people are going to get involved. I think that it's important to realize it's not expected, even if it's mandatory. Like, it's not going to be expected. And I think another thing I would challenge people to do when they think about entering the course creation contest is to ask themselves if a course is even the right modality.
Mm.
Right? Because there were some things where I was like, this could have been an email. Or a very short video, and now I'm doing like an hour-long thing, and it's not. And here's the thing too, like, it's not clear who the audience is supposed to be. It's fine if you give me the heads up that, like, this is going to be a deep dive and it's going to go much further than you're used to in this particular topic, but that never really happened.
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience. Contextually, I think there's a challenge there, because you are entering a contest. You don't know if this is supposed to be like part of a learning program, part of a bigger, I always kind of imagine when I am judging that this is part of a larger initiative. Okay. I never assumed that this is like a standalone thing, right? That I'm looking at. And even still, there were some things where I struggled to understand the context. I struggled to understand why they had chosen this particular topic for e-learning. I saw a lot of things where I suspect, okay, I suspect that AI was involved from stem to stern in saying, what should I do this contest about, right? Typity type. Like, what topic should I do this? And I saw some topics that were similar enough where I was like, oh, interesting. Did you guys use the same chat GPT? But then I saw like that same thing with the actual, like you said, learning objectives. I can tell some of that was copy pasta. You know, the the way it was kind of organized, right, was like, why would you put that there if you need to know that, like, there was just a lack of human reasoning in, like, I always try to put myself in the designer's shoes when I'm judging, right? And I try to say, like, what was their thought process, what were maybe they thinking when they made this decision. And there's like a very serious, like, there's almost like a block,
Mm.
right, with some of the entries where I'm like, how much AI did this person use? Because I can't get into their headspace, and I feel like that's why. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that there's. I think this is what people miss about a lot of AI generated stuff. Is it can make perfectly good sense, but when you try and drill in past the surface, it's made decisions no human being would ever make, or made them in the wrong order for what a human would have done, and that leads to, you only notice it when you really scrutinize.
Yeah.
Because I saw the same thing in some of mine, and we see the same thing when we do things like the Learning Technologies Awards judging. Sometimes you look and you go, there is no way a human did this. It's too coldly logical and analytical, like to the exclusion of all else.
Yeah.
There's no human, thinking going on here. It becomes surprisingly clear. I always think when you scratch below the surface on these things. Um,
Yeah.
One thing that really struck me was there was a category. There's like an award category for like best business case for a piece thing, and there were remarkably few recommendations for that award. Like so the ones that went through were really really good. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of the courses did not articulate a clear business need that they were addressing. So a
No.
bit like when it's like easy points, a clear business case. Like, we should be looking at it and thinking, I get why a business would commission this piece of training.
Yes.
Like a good example, like, a course that I really enjoyed was like a narrative time management piece. It was like an interesting experience. They'd had a really good go at writing like a narrative that progressed. But I have never known, or I would never recommend a business with time management problems commission a 30-minute e-learning. But that is not a good way to address time management problems. It's just not.
Yes.
That is the classic. There's a problem. Don't worry, we'll train it away. Solution.
Yes.
So no matter
Yeah.
how good the narrative was, or how if they'd used amazing imagery or whatever, it was always going to not work fundamentally
Sure.
because it's trying to solve a problem that we shouldn't be trying to train like this. Um,
Sure.
like the narrative that was there was, oh, you're late for work. It's like, well, then your manager should deal with that. Like,
Yeah.
the solution here is your manager is going to sit you down and say, right, what's going on? You need to be at work on time. The solution is
Right.
not going to be, don't worry that you're late, do this time management e-learning, waste another 30 minutes of business time.
Right. Yes. Have a conversation with a fake robot who's supposed to pretend to be your boss while we, give you excuses to tell them as to why you're late.
But at the same time, like, I see why, if when we try and create our own business cases, I think often we're not close enough to the business conversation to understand what businesses do and don't actually require training for. Because I say that, and yet if you search for time management in every content library, you'll find the Eisenhower
You
box
sure
method
will.
in X many easy steps, or whatever. Time boxing,
Yeah.
the 7 billion courses we've got on the idea of basically use a calendar. We had to give it a special name, and we now train people on it. It's the most L&D thing in the world. The idea that we would go, we've revolutionary new idea. What if you set time aside to do things in your calendar? Oh, look at that,
Yes,
isn't it
I know.
mind-boggling idea?
Plan your time. That's how
Yeah.
you manage it. Is you time management,
Yeah.
manage your time
I do wonder how like
mindfully.
centuries of human beings managed to get stuff done before we came out with these things.
They
But
clearly didn't,
I,
obviously. See, we're
this
the
this
most
is it.
advanced and we're the most attentive to time.
We are
So
obsessed with
that's
productivity,
clearly
so.
why.
Um, but yeah, it's just that there is just, I think, this need, and this isn't a competition specific need, but I think it highlights a broader L&D need that applies to the competition as well, to be closer to real business needs, to
Yeah.
understand what's going on in organizations and how we can actually help, rather than what there might be an opportunity to create training for, because those are two different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
an opportunity where we can go, I'm going to create training on this because there's that problem in the business. But rather than saying, can we create something, if we switch that to, can we help solve this problem, then I think we would be doing better work, and competition entries would also improve, because we would have it in our minds of, oh, I could write, no, I shouldn't do that because that's not a realistic business case. What I should do is this generally much smaller thing as well. You'd have an easier time winning competitions building something smaller, which would be more realistic to a business deployment.
Yeah.
I just realized what the time was. We are rocketing into our
I know.
last 13 minutes, and there are a bunch of comments that we've just kind of not ignored. You've
Yeah.
not been ignored, audience. I think we were
Not a
on a bit of a roll.
My LinkedIn wasn't working there for a minute and I missed like half of them for a while, so I had
Let's
to refresh.
have a look. So, controversial opinion, but I genuinely end up checking out when I'm on a course and see obvious use of AI generated images, because it gives me an uncanny feeling I don't like whilst learning. That's fair enough. I think that's something we have to concern ourselves with, isn't it? Like, user experience is important.
Yeah, I don't think that's controversial. I think a lot of people feel that way in organizations. Like, because I've heard the same thing too about like beyond animation from non L&D people, is that they're like, oh, when I see that like cartoon stuff, like, they're like, I hate those cartoons that you guys are always making us watch.
Yeah, I always feel like animation. There you go. There's the genuinely creative industry, animation, right? Highly technical, but good animation requires mind-bogglingly high levels of skill, and beyond ain't it. I'm sorry, it's just not. Um,
And
since,
that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people who entered our industry because they saw a piece of it that appealed to them. Animation, gamification, education, facilitation, all the Asians. And they were attracted to that and they were like, oh, like this would be really cool. But they don't realize that like in learning and development, we don't really do those things. We do like some semblance of them that is good enough for the product. And so like my thing has always been, and I've said this for like so many years, that like I don't want to play your silly L&D game because I am a gamer. I want to log off my work computer 15 minutes early and go play my real games on my real consoles that somebody spent time making, instead of your crappy Jeopardy game or your crappy Tetris game, which by the way, if you're ripping off these, $1 million companies, that's an ethical issue as well. So every time you create a Jeopardy or a Tetris or a Mario knockoff, you are, especially if you're ripping off Nintendo, good luck with that, because they will come after you eventually.
sadly so, yes. But it's just always a thing of, do we really want to invite those comparisons? We're never going to be that good, so why set ourselves up for that inevitable failure?
Yes.
And the other thing is, I see a lot of very talented people put a lot of effort into doing it. I always want to go, if you could just target that effort at not this. You would
Yes.
create amazing, like, we can create really
Oh,
good
yes.
game based or game theory informed kind of learning experiences, but not by trying to
Absolutely.
pretend that we're going to make a video game. You know,
Yes.
we can look
Yeah.
at what makes a video game work, and we can utilize that without trying to make a video game. You
Right.
know, we just need to
Right.
a little bit harder, a little bit more work, but you know, I think we need to be thinking about that. Um, Comments going. I've noticed many companies want to stay a level 1 learning organization, so they can get a number and check off a box, basically do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I think a lot of L&D teams choose to do that. I think
I, I yeah, that's
yeah,
a good point. Hmm.
I'm always
That's
a
a
little
really good
bit,
point.
yeah, like if someone actually sat down with the CEO and the board or whoever's really making decisions and said, we could deliver you the following value if we did this, but it's going to cost this, it's going to require this level of input. This is what we're doing at the minute, we're box ticking. Would that board actually go, yes, we are fully happy with box ticking? And some will. I'm not saying it's none,
Yes,
but I think it is far fewer than the number of teams who feel that it is the case.
I
I think
agree.
we don't tend to articulate that opportunity well.
Yes, I have found it has been a very low number, probably about 10% of organizations that actually go, no, no, we're cool, just check the box. And it's like, it's a far greater number that once you really are able to articulate value and you're able to articulate that impact and you're able to measure. And I mean, I had to get away from Kirkpatrick and make my own framework to do that. And be able to do that over the last decade. Um, but it can be done. And I think that it is, it's also becoming, I'm finding the chasm between like the crappy AI content library teams that just want to put out more, like get us our library, get us our e-learning developers, and those that are focused on like performance improvement. I'm
Mm.
finding that chasm to be becoming like greater and greater. And I think that there's this kind of growing divide. And I think you're going to see a lot of these like content mill companies fall away. I mean, you're already seeing, look at what was it, Udemy and Coursera merged. They
Yep.
didn't merge because they're both doing so amazing that they're like having a Coke and Pepsi, competition.
Yeah.
They merged because people aren't consuming courses, right? They're not doing that. That's not how people want to consume their information anymore, right? There's like a push away from that.
No, absolutely. And like it's always difficult because I was just that we both work external to any one given business, right? So it is much easier for us to look at the way functions work and say we should fundamentally change things, because
Yeah.
because we're not in it day in day out. This is, believe it or not, this is actually a pitch for getting a consultant into your business. Not it's not a direct pitch.
Either one of us, we're free.
There we go. But no, but that
Call
is
us.
sometimes that is the benefit. Whether you do it or not, and sometimes, and this is what I did before I started doing it, I figured out I would need to adopt that same mindset of I may burn some bridges here, but if I can succeed, I will be able to prove that I am valuable and that we are valuable, and that is
Yeah.
more useful to me long term and more important than the bridges I'm going to burn getting there. And that not everyone works that out with the same answer, and that's fine. It might in your organization, in your situation, it might be a different answer to that question. I was pretty kind of like, well, either we fix this or I'm leaving, so I may as well try and fix it. If you're not at that point, then you're probably fine. Hey, Ronnie, thank you for joining us. Lovely to see you here. There was one last comment I wanted to make sure we did. Oh, I thought this was great. Heidi and Tom, order of expertise there, Heidi, so you'll have to answer this question. After listening to you reflect on which modality is best, I wondered if the following principles can be applied to course creation: purpose, goal, audience, modalities, application, problem solving, authentic learning. So in the 5 minutes we have left, if you could just deconstruct that proposed model for me, figure out if it's worth adopting, and then come up with an implementation framework, Heidi. That's
No,
the standard L&D
yeah.
timeline.
I think that those are all good principles. I hesitate to give any specific feedback because there's probably a lot more too, right? That we could probably add to this list. But I think that those are all important things to look at. Let me shift the conversation just a little bit. I think that those things are all important to look at in terms of measuring and telling the story of impact. Right?
Typical L&D, see, deflecting away from the question, just doing what they want to do.
Sunday school answer: it depends, or God. Done. Now we don't have to talk anymore.
Oh, amazing. I mean, the only thing I would do is I would move modalities right to the end after learning, because that's just the truck that delivers the food. The food's good whether it arrives in a Mini
Clark
Cooper.
And Cosma debate that we have to have for another day. Yeah. Oh, this is
Amazing.
A good one because I disagree with that one.
Oh, yep. We're gonna have to do that next month.
I'm on
Let's
the
do
other
that next
side.
month. Okay. We will.
It'll be a good one.
Well, we won't try and tackle that in 3 minutes. We will come back to you next month about that. But in the meantime, to wrap things up, Heidi, where can people see you over the next month? What have you got coming up?
What have I got coming up? At the end of next month, I'm going to be doing a webinar with iSpring on ID portfolios. We're going to keep this conversation going. So stay tuned, follow me on LinkedIn and find out about that. And then I'm also still accepting proposals for the Learning Rejects Conference, whether you want to be a sponsor, a speaker, or a volunteer. I just did a post today, so go check out my LinkedIn for more info on that as well.
Amazing. And for anyone who's not checked it out yet, the last IDTX conference is in October for this year. We are currently accepting proposals. We're also accepting submissions for the next round of the IDTX magazine, entitled The Summer of Learning. It's got a very nice orange and brown front cover to kind of set that kind of, it's kind of like the heat stroke people just being on fire in the UK at the moment. It's just like a little puddle at the bottom of the front cover I'm going to need to edit in now. But so if you would like to share an article on some form of evidence-informed L&D practice, whether it's a project that went really well, an idea you want to share, a framework that works for you, we'd love to see a submission. Same for the conference. And we've also, in about a week, tickets go up for our 2027 events, 2 virtual conferences and our next in-person event in Birmingham, which is the 21st of May, which will be the second Evidence-Informed Practice Conference. We'll also be announcing the keynote speaker for that, and it is really exciting. Year 1 this year, obviously, we had Matthew Richter come over and talk all things motivation and self-determination theory. Next year, we are going to be diving deep into the brain, but the announcement of exactly who's joining us will be coming out in a couple of weeks' time, but it's very exciting. Thank you all for joining us today. From all over the world, I think, judging by the little pings on the map. We're coming from everywhere, which is lovely. We will see you again next month, where we will argue about modalities. And there we go.
Yeah, we will.
We'll massively fall out, and it'll be the last show ever. There we go. Have an amazing weekend, everyone, and we hope to see you again next month.